Will the Senate come to order? Senator from Chittenden.
Thank you, Mr. President. The amendment for the education bill is coming out of editing. It's going to be mailed to the sponsor and quickly looked over. But rather than waste our time, I'm going to have us move to the OPR bill, which is H472. So at this time, Mr. President, I would move that we suspend our rules in order to take H472, an act relating to professions and occupations regulated by the Office of Professional Regulation, up for immediate action.
The senator from Chittenden has moved that the Senate suspend its rules to take up H472 for immediate action. Are you ready for the question? If so, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The motion carries. We have on the calendar for action H472, an act relating to professional and occupational regulated by the Office of Professional Regulation. It passed the House on March 12th of 2025. It was referred to the Committee on Government Operations and General Affairs, which reports it has considered the bill and recommends that the Senate propose to the House that the bill be amended as it appears in today's calendar, and that with such proposal of amendment, the bill ought to pass. Affecting the revenues of the state, the bill was referred to the Committee on Finance, which recommends that the bill ought to pass in concurrence with proposal of amendment as recommended by the Committee on Government Operations. Affecting the expenditures of the state, the bill was referred to the Committee on Appropriations, which recommends that the bill ought to pass in concurrence with the proposal of amendment as recommended by the Committee on Government Operations, with further proposal of amendment as found in your calendar today. Listen to the second reading of the bill.
H472, an act relating to professions and occupations regulated by the Office of Professional Regulation.
Recognize the senator from Windsor District, Senator White, for the report of the Committee on Government Operations.
Thank you, Mr. President. Finally, the bill we have all been waiting for tonight. The Office of Professional Regulation, also known as the OPR bill, has once again entered the Senate chamber. I'm going to be reporting for you the entirety of the bill, and I'm going to try to do it with a little more brevity than I normally would have. And we also don't have, I believe, the two different legislative counselors who are a part of this creation process. So if you have specific questions, detailed questions that I don't have an answer for, I'm happy to follow up with those legislative counselors afterwards with you. So H472 is the Office of Professional Regulation bill. To steal the phrase from the senator from Rutland, the bluff is that this bill came out of our committee 5-0-0. OPR is responsible for the regulation of over 53 professions in Vermont. It is a special fund agency, which means it is designated as a subset of the fees that are collected. The OPR fund has been operating at a deficit and is currently projected at $1.5 million. This is largely due because of licensure compacts, which means that Vermont loses license deficits, has a license deficit, and OPR has asked to conduct a money study that they conducted to have last session, and they, those compact increases due to regulatory costs through enforcement. Okay, let me rephrase that. So essentially the license compacts that we as Vermont have lose us money over time, but we gain regional licensure and there's benefits to that. That has led to a deficit in the OPR fund. They've been studying it. And one of the main goals of this bill is to help kind of get us to a better place where we don't have as much of a deficit. The fees in this bill do not adequately cover that deficit for OPR, but it is a small step moving in the right direction as passed out of your Senate Government Operations Committee. The first section of this bill, before you get to section 14, which I'll go into extensive detail on, the first two goals of this is to fix previous legislative mistakes where fees were unintentionally dropped from statutes. And the second main goal is to charge for voluntary services that OPR has previously not charged for or have had a low fee for. 472 is also a bill of sunrises and sunsets. This bill deregulates the motor vehicle racing, which I'll talk about in the section by section, that they found through a sunset report. We found that regulation by the state is unnecessary for that profession because it is adequately regulated in other ways. The bill also establishes a licensure program for early childhood educators. That's at section 14 and on that I'll spend some time on. And this proposal was made after an extensive sunrise process, which found a public need for protection and regulation of that field. So let's dive right into Title III with section 1. And but before I do that, you got two handouts. The first is the JFO fiscal note. Very helpful. If you don't listen to me, just read the fiscal note. It really gives you the info that you need to make an informed decision. And then the second handout you got is for a little bit later around early childhood education and the different ECEs that you'll hear all about later. But let's talk about the general OPR provisions, starting with the changes to Title III. So section 1 of this bill, which if you're following along in your calendar, would be starting on page 2590. The first section adds a provision to allow the Secretary of State to charge for data feeds provided to third parties. This is a voluntary service by which the office provides licensing or business data that is personalized to the needs of each requested end user, most often Vermont businesses or healthcare facilities. And those fees would be established by policy. So what we're talking about here is feeds of data and information primarily about nurses, and are those nurses still up to licensure, that they are then providing to the hospitals, because our hospitals, in this example, are trying to make sure they don't have unlicensed nurses. So if someone loses their license, they're tracking that. But that stream of data, that work, we've been giving away for free, and now it's become a lot of work, and we want to get some compensation for the amount of work that OPR is putting forward. That's the main example we're thinking of here, but it would also be related to other data streams around licensure to third parties. Section 2 increases the licensure fee from $20 to $30. The license verification fee from $20 to $30. License verifications are requested by licensees seeking licensure in other states or who are providing official verifications to employers. And this information is also available on OPR's website in real time at no charge, but we're requiring a license verification fee to go up if it is requested and they don't want to look it up online. Further in that section, we reestablish an electrology shop fee. Interesting little mix-up. We lost the electrology shop fee unintentionally. If you don't know what electrolysis is, it is, as I Googled it, the destroying of hair follicles. So that is now back. We brought that back. That was an unfortunate inadvertent drop from a bill in 2019. It also puts that fee back at $200. So electrolysis is not a new thing that we're adding. We're returning it, and it is a fee that's going in there that previously was missed. So we are allowing electrology shops who have not been charged a fee for 2 renewal cycles to not have to, we're not back trying to get that electrolysis fee. There are also new charges for services that OPR currently provides for free in that section 2. It would charge $50 for an apprenticeship application. This is a low-cost pathway to licensure in many of our regulated professions. The applicant chooses this pathway instead of going through a formal education, for example. And the apprenticeship pathway to licensure requires additional work by OPR before approval of a license. It also creates a specialty license fee that would be assessed at the application and renewal. And it unlocks basically that specialty on that license unlocks privileges for those applicants to engage in new professional capacities and requires additional and sometimes complicated review of qualifications from OPR. So that's a specialty license fee when you have an additional specialty on your license. This section establishes, it continues. If you're following along on B11, this section also establishes a disciplinary action surcharge of $250. So when you're a regulated profession, if you violate something within that profession, if you have a disciplinary action against you, that can take a lot of work for us to investigate, to have conclusions drawn, to adjudicate complaints in those cases, to determine if a practitioner has engaged in unprofessional conduct. So that enforcement actually costs quite a significant amount of money. And so that substantial cost is actually borne by the licensees of that entire profession. So folks who, by and large, have not engaged in unprofessional conduct. So we believe that this surcharge would be intended to offset a portion of the enforcement cost that's now being spread to all licensees. So if you behave badly, if you behave unprofessionally, and you receive disciplinary action, you got a $250 surcharge now. Further, we strike a provision around renewal fees during a license lapse if the licensee has been practicing without a current license for under 2 years in certain circumstances. So we strike that, so we no longer have that. Okay, so in section 3, this section adjusts the renewal fee for peer support providers or peer recovery support specialists. When the original legislation for this profession was enacted, the renewal fee was intended to increase from $50 to $75. However, the fee increase did not make it into the fee statute. So again, back to that first goal of correcting past errors. Section 4 sets forth the duties of OPR and is amended in the following ways. We strike the last section that refunds the $25 second chance determination fee. OPR had requested that we strike that refund because second chance determinations are resource intensive, requiring review by attorneys and licensing supervisors. And although this fee is minimal, it does offset some of the agency's financial expenditure in offering this service. So if you're not familiar with second chance determination, it's if your license is taken away, you get a second chance. Pretty simple. We are requiring now that there be a fee for that. We also add a provision that exempts OPR from that specific section, 3 VSA 11.6 A and B sections, which mandates the termination of state boards 5 years from the date of their creation or the last date that the statutory or session law containing the state board was amended, whichever was latest. OPR requested that we amend that section for each professional chapter in Title 26 to maintain those professional boards, and it also wanted to utilize their sunset requirements in Chapter 57 of Title 26 to periodically assess those regulatory programs. So rather than just every 5 years they go away, it's instead they get to periodically assess, and also we amended it to allow for boards that are acting, are doing good things. They don't just go away at the end of 5 years. They can stay in place because that you want to maintain continuity with staff and resources. So Section 5 raises the ceiling for administrative penalties for unauthorized practice of up to $5,000. That is the same maximum penalty allowed when such action is pursued in superior court. So we're trying to line up what the courts can do if you have unauthorized practice. So let's say you're a tattoo artist, but you didn't ever get a tattoo artist license, and you're practicing and you're potentially harming people. Now we've raised the maximum to $5,000 of what you could be having an administrative penalty for, which is the same that we see in the courts. Section 6 authorizes the assessment of a $250 disciplinary action surcharge consistent with the language you heard before. Now we get into Title 26. So we're moving on from Title 3, moving to Title 26. Section 7 is all about barbers and cosmetology. It provides post-secondary school of barbering and cosmetology requirements in that subsection 26 VSA 281, and we amend that to include language regarding the training and education around textured hair. We're finally getting there. We're finally getting to allow cosmetology and barbershops to include the wide diversity of hair textures and types that have been previously excluded from being considered towards these licenses. This is exciting. It changes some of the basic requirements to ensure that diverse population has access to competent hair care and treatment services. Section 8 is around licensing nursing assistants. We believe that this will streamline the process for demonstrating competency for renewal when an LNA has been out of practice for at least 5 years. This language will help clarify that that person would need to retake the competency test, but not the whole LNA education program program unless they fail the exam. So trying to make sure that people who are still competent in their field, we need those nursing assistants. Now this is this next section, section 9. I think we had a little bit of conversation about this because on its face you might be concerned because this amendment, the way this bill is structured is it removes motor vehicle racing from the list of regulated professions. And you might think this is a dangerous profession, we want to regulate it. Well, we actually found through a sunset review assessment of the profession, which was filed back in the beginning of the year, we actually found that it was recommended that the profession be deregulated for one main reason, that it's not necessary to protect the public because the insurance industry actually provides the majority of oversight which addresses the risk to the public, and we are one of only a handful of states that actually regulate motor vehicle racing in this way. So if you enjoy motor vehicle racing and you also want to be safe, well, lucky you, you get both of those things with this bill. We expect that will be a loss of revenue of approximately $14,000. Section 10 is around funeral services relating to escrow agents who we strike some information within this section around those escrow agents because we don't have an enforcement mechanism with respect to individuals who are not licensed by the agency. So it has essentially not been being practiced. We haven't been regulating these folks in that way. And we believe that if we haven't been regulating them, there hasn't necessarily been any legal fiduciary duties that have been violated. It's not something that we need to keep on the books. Section 11 continues further repeal around that and the motor vehicle racing section as we noted before. Section 12 is around the appropriation and creation of a professional mental health executive officer. So OPR in particular created a mental health study that we asked them to do with Act 117 and then Act 77. And at a high level, they found 4 things. First, that OPR's regulatory structure of mental health professionals would benefit from a vertical consolidation and reorganization, basically having 17 professional silos under one umbrella, under one board. It's the second reason was it's possible to streamline entry qualifications without lowering the professional competency of those requirements. Third, additional regulations for supervisors can support both the quality of and provider interest in clinical supervision services. And finally, OPR found that there are barriers to licensure into the mental health professionals for individuals from marginalized groups. So we're trying to support all 4 of those goals by having the creation of a position of mental health executive officer. Okay, so then we get into section 13 with massage therapy establishments. So after consultation with stakeholders and identified entities, OPR submitted proposed language to us around the regulation of massage therapy establishments back in at the beginning of the year in November. And they're hoping that with this language, we can help to fight human trafficking within our state, which is a very serious situation. We create a review with stakeholders, including the massage therapists, folks from the Vermont Domestic Violence Association, those groups coming together so we can reduce human trafficking within the massage therapy establishment regulation. So pretty serious stuff there. So now I'm going to transition to the next part of the bill, which is around early childhood education. So the first part of this bill was around the Office of Professional Regulation, all of those different professions that have traditionally already been regulated. Well, this is a new one. We are entering a new era of early childhood education being regulated, being a profession within our state. So Section 14 the reason we began this whole process of creating early childhood educators comes from 3 things. The first is we heard from folks who work in early childhood education now that they wanted the dignity and the professionalization that comes with being regulated by OPR, that industry was asking for this type of professional regulation. And we heard that throughout our testimony from many different types of child care and early childhood childhood educators. So that was the first goal. The second was there was a major Sunrise report that was done by OPR that found that there is a danger to the public when we don't regulate that profession. So that's really key. The reason the Office of Professional Regulation would ever regulate a profession is because there is danger to the public if it is not regulated. That's really their foundation. And then the last piece of this is that we've done a lot of work around early childhood education as a legislature. If you were here over the last few legislative sessions, you know how much money, time, and effort we've put into expanding access to affordable childcare in our state and affordable early childhood education. So this bill is the next step to professionalizing that career separate from how we already regulate it now. So there's a lot in this, and it's a change. And what you have on your desks that you got handed out, the brightly colored chart, if you want to look at that, if it's of interest to you, it really does track what we're talking about within the regulation of each of those folks. So that's very helpful if you'd like to look at that. So at the conclusion of the work that happened with that Sunrise report I explained to you, there was a couple of conclusions that came through. OPR had determined that early childhood educators in childcare homes and center-based facilities regulated by CDD, those should be those individual professionals, not just the facilities, should also be regulated through licensure. That would ensure the quality and care of that education through increased educational and experiential requirements for early childhood educators who do bear the primary responsibility for care and education of young children ages 0 through 8. And they do so in family and child care homes and in center-based child care facilities. We also saw that it would reduce harms of low quality early childhood care. Including children who are unprepared to enter public school, have suboptimal physical and mental health impacts, and have poor developmental outcomes in the short and long term. Like, this is serious. If early childhood educators are not properly doing their job, it can have long-term ramifications for the children impacted. It establishes a streamlined preparation pathway for individuals entering the profession so that they have the necessary minimum qualifications to provide early quality child care for Vermont's youngest and most vulnerable populations. It also establishes a clearly articulated uniform standard of practices and ethics in those private settings that align with the standards that we see often in public schools and that require individual accountability for meeting those standards. So if you're familiar with the early childhood or child care world, you know that right now CDD regulates the facilities themselves, but an individual who is in the field is not regulated as an individual. So a big part of this is making that a movable, professional benefits the wrong word, but it basically allows that person to be their own entity within the early childhood education workforce and potentially even see an increase in their wages. So that's another big part of this, is if you as an individual have an ECE2, you're in a much better position to potentially go to another place to have like professional standards that childcare facility can recognize and has uniformity across the profession. So if you're still with me, that would provide families and the consumers of that service with an easy, accessible platform to know the qualifications of the early childhood educators who bear the responsibility for taking care and educating their children in non-public settings. Okay, so I can spend a lot of time on this, just so you know, but I'm going to limit it to just talking about continuing to talk about section 14 and then pretty much wrapping up because I want to leave it since we're looking at the time. Okay, so some of the scopes of the program include the ECE3, which is the highest and most professionalized active licensure, the ECE2, which could be a lead teacher, and then the ECE1. So all of those would have basically you have a track going up to the ECE3 within that. So it's kind of a ladder of professionalization that we're creating within it. And what we heard in committee was that an ECE1, for example, could be a student straight out of high school. In fact, we had a young woman who presented to us in our committee who had actually all of the qualifications right out of high school to enter ECE1. When now, if we do not move forward with this bill, her only way to get a certification to be a professional early childhood educator would be to seek a teacher's license, which is a 4-year college degree, and then get on top of that a specialty endorsement in early childhood education or early childhood education for those with special needs. That would be the only path for that person to get kind of a licensing and credentialed early childhood educator role. They would have to get that bachelor's degree. So we're also talking about getting people into the profession and moving them forward. Okay, so I'm going to wrap up on all of that ECE excitement that you just heard about and jump right to Section 18, which is the appropriations that implement this work. Not going to speak too long about it because I understand there is a report coming from appropriations that may make some of what I would say moot. So then Section 19 allows for the accessibility and confidentiality within disciplinary matters. So we've ended the early childhood education thing. We're on a new topic. So OPR is required to maintain a public registry of all complaints against practitioners in professions that the agency regulates. So I'll give you the example we got in committee. We got a huge printout of all of the complaints against massage therapists. So on that big spreadsheet of what behavior that was unethical within that professional that happened, it also could have listed the names of those who had made the complaint. So what Section 19 does is it allows for confidentiality and privacy for those who are making the complaint to the disciplinary board. So as you may kind of just logically know, if you would have your name listed in association with a less than good complaint, that may deter you from making that complaint in the first place, and we want to avoid that. So we thank deeply the Secretary of State's office for bringing that point to us and for their help broadly with this bill. So with that, I've essentially concluded my floor report. There are multiple different effective dates, but there is a timeline for the early childhood educators that is very detailed, where the licensure of those folks, we're looking 8 years out from requiring full licensure for anyone in the profession. So there's lots of different timelines within that. So with that, Mr. President, I would conclude my floor report, get back to the bluff, which is that this was fully supported by our committee, and I'm open to any technical or detailed questions because I did kind of broad strokes over some of the professional regulation of the early childhood educators, and thank you for listening so diligently to my floor report.
I now recognize the senator from Addison District, Senator Hardy, for the report of the Committee on Finance.
Thank you, Mr. President. This bill is H472, and you just got an extremely well done and detailed report from the senator from the Windsor District, so I will spare you the details. There are some fees in this bill. Most of these are new fees for things that OPR does now for free, like verification of licensures. And because OPR spends time doing this work, and because they are in a bit of a financial squeeze, they would like to charge modest fees for things like verification of licensure, or if you have a specialty endorsement on your existing license, and then also some a proposed fee for an apprenticeship application. These are things that are extra duties that the Office of OPR does. There also is a reduction of fee because they are no longer going to regulate motor vehicle racing. So hopefully somebody is watching the governor when he does that. The impact of all of this is a net of about a little over 200,000, 216,500 in 2 years. There are also fees related to the early childhood education portion of the bill, But as you'll find out from the Appropriations Committee, that has been taken out of the bill in part and delayed, so those fees don't go into effect and are not really relevant to the current fiscal note. So your Committee on Finance approved the bill in a vote of 7-0-0, and we ask the Senate to do the same. Thank you, Mr. President.
I now recognize the senator from Washington District, Senator Perchlik, for the report of the Committee on Senator from Windsor.
I just wanted to correct some misinformation on my part.
Oh.
On my part. Nothing you said. Sorry. I want to apologize to the senator from Chittenden. It was actually, my bluff was wrong. It was 4-1.
Now I recognize the senator from Washington District, Senator Perchlik, for the report of the Committee on Appropriations.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Committee on Appropriations recommends that this bill ought to pass in concurrence with the proposal made by the Committee on Government Operations. But with further recommendations from the Committee on Appropriations as follows. 2 instances of amendment. These are on page 2606. The first one is to strike all section 18, which is really the part of creating this child care licensure program. So I guess we're not getting rid of it entirely. We'll keep section 18. It'll just say deleted. The second instance of amendment is section 20, which is the effective dates, which are the same except for conditions. So there's 2 effective dates. Section 3, the fees are the same. Those will be effective on July 1st, 2027. Section 16 and section 17 will take effect on July 1st, 2027, contingent on a fiscal year 2027 appropriation to implement the section 18 that we deleted. This was agreed on favorably by your Committee on Appropriations on a vote of 7-0-0. And just as a context for why we took out the appropriations and the positions and put the effective date of an appropriation is we didn't, at the timing of this bill hasn't gone to the House yet, so the House Appropriations Committee hadn't seen it. So when we were in budget negotiations with the House, even though we had acted, knew this was happening, they had not. So we weren't able to get it into the budget. So we didn't want to pass this with appropriation language or positions being created, because the creation of positions was a big part of our budget negotiations. So we wanted to make sure that any positions to be created or money to be appropriated would happen further consideration next year. Thank you.
So the question is, shall the recommendation of proposal of amendment of the Committee on Government Operations be amended as recommended by the Committee on Appropriations? Are you ready for the question? Senator from Rutland.
Thank you, Mr. President. May I inquire of the presenter of the amendment?
Of the amendment from Appropriations?
No, for the bill.
The presenter from Windsor is interrogated.
Mr. President, point of information, I'm wondering if the senator is wishing to speak to the bill rather than the appropriations.
That is a good question. Senator from Rutland, we are on the Appropriations Amendment right now. So the question still is, shall the recommendation of proposal of amendment of the Committee on Government Operations be amended as recommended by the Committee on Appropriations? Are you ready for that question? If so, all in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Let's see. And you've amended the recommendation of proposal of amendment of the Committee on Government Operations as recommended by the Committee on Appropriations. The question now is, shall the Senate propose to the House to amend the bill as recommended by the Committee on Government Operations? Senator from Rutland.
Thank you, Mr. President. May I inquire of the presenter?
The reporter is interrogated.
So section 16 talks about early childhood education credentials, and it looks like there's an increase in requirements for education for these. I remember last biennium we went through, I think it was H217, Act 67, which was supposed to get us more home childcare facilities so that we could have more children in childcare. And I just wondering about that, the addition, is this require additional training? Is this bill going to require additional training for home health care? Or home
Yes.
childcare?
Yes, the answer to that question is yes.
Okay. I thank you, Mr. President.
Senator from Chittenden.
Thank you, Mr. President. If I might ask a question of
The reporter's interrogated.
So, and I believe this may have been where the previous senator was going. I'm looking at page 2603. And I think one of the things that people have in their mind is that if we're licensing and requiring education, what will happen to the folks currently performing these jobs that don't meet those requirements? My reading, Mr. President, of the section called Variances Transitional Licensure is that if someone is providing childcare and they don't meet the educational or other requirements, they can get, as I read it, up to 8 years extension to allow them to reach that point. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. And I would also say, thank you for that question. Yes, there is a legacying of a whole swath of family care at-home based professionals. And in addition to that, what we heard from the providers was that it could take someone in the at-home industry, profession, anywhere from 4 to 8 years to meet the credentialing. So that's why we have that long runway of 8 years, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I thank the reporter. This was one of the questions that I had about this bill. I'm reassured by you can get 3 2-year extensions and then a final 2-year extension. So nearly a decade for someone to complete these requirements. Thank you, Mr. President.
Are you ready for the question? Senator from Essex.
Thank you. If I could inquire of the presenter.
The reporter is interrogated.
Mr. President, I seem to remember last year we had a substantial fee increase as far as the packages of, we went through DMV and we went through OPR. I believe, I think it was almost $20 million. I could be very wrong with that. It's very dangerous to be throwing out numbers like that. And I'm dismayed to hear the report from finance that says that they're squeezed on revenues. Did not the fee increases go through that we approved last year?
I'm not familiar with the specific OPR fee increases that the senator is referring to from a previous session. I remember the DMV fees going up substantially and having significant debate about that. But if the question is more, why do we have a deficit if we increase the fees, if I'm understanding the question?
Maybe, Mr. President, before third reading, maybe we could, as long as this doesn't go to third reading now, maybe I could get an answer on that back to the fee increases. I know we did do the fee increases. I'm just curious to why why it would be suffering so much right now. Thank you, Mr. President. And thank the presenter.
Senator from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. President. I may be able to help since I believe I reported the last fee increases. Over the last several years, it was mentioned we have done the allowance for interstate compacts for licensing. We did nursing. So now, rather than just get a nursing license in Vermont, you can get a compact license, which A, costs less, and B, lets you practice nursing in any of those states. I believe we've done it for psychologists, we've done it for social workers, we've done it for numerous professions. And I remember when I reported the finance report on the last one, and we did the fiscal note, it was like, well, it's de minimis, it's 5,000 here, 6,000 there. I think there were 2 or 3 last time. And I remember explicitly saying that, it may be 5,000 here and 5,000 there, but eventually it adds up to real money. And I said then, we will have to compensate. And it's my understanding that because the fees cover the cost for the regulation of the profession. So if we lower the fees, we still have to regulate those nurses. We are responsible for those nurses that are operating as travelers within this state. If there's a problem, we send it back to their home state for discipline. But we're still have some responsibility for them. So that's the dynamic. It's been going on for a number of years. It's helped people that want to be licensed and who may be traveling spouses or who may just be young and want to move around. But it has had an impact, and we've known the day of reckoning was coming.
Are you ready for the question? The question is, shall the Senate propose to the House to amend the bill as recommended by the Committee on Government Operations as amended? All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay.
No.
The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it, and you've proposed to the House to amend the bill as proposed by the Committee on Government Operations. The question now is, shall the bill be read a third time? Are you ready for the question? If so, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay.
Nay.
The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. And you have ordered third reading of H 472. We will take a brief recess. Senator from Chittenden.
Thank you, Mr. President. The amendment for the ed bill that I mentioned earlier has been sent to the Secretary's office. In advance of bringing it to the floor, I'd like to ask for a 15-minute Democratic caucus in room 10. So if everybody on the fall of the gavel could quickly get down to room 10, we'll have a brief explanation of what's going on. Then we'll come back upstairs. So I'd ask, Mr. President, that we recess until 7:05.
We'll stand in recess until 7:05.